He's a tough street-fighting lawyer with the highest ratings for honesty and integrity. He's here to answer your legal questions and get you the help you need. You're listening to the Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram of Joe Ingram Law. Joe Ingram has more than 20 years' experience fighting for his clients here in the state of Alabama. Joe's focus is criminal defense and family law. You don't have to face your legal issue alone. You've got Joe Ingram on your side. In case of sensitive legal matters, you can always reach out directly to Joe at joeingramlaw.com and arrange for a private consultation. And now, Alabama's defender of the defenseless, protector of the people, and all-around good guy, Joe Ingram.
All right. This is Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, your Alabama lawyer on WERC 105.5 FM in Birmingham, WBHP up in Huntsville, and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. As I promised you last week, we have United States Congressman Barry Moore from the 1st District of Alabama, who's in the studio today, and I've kidnapped him. It's a joke. I've talked him into doing the whole show with me. So you're in for a treat today, Alabama, because you're going to get to hear from somebody that more likely than not could be the junior senator for the state of Alabama under Senator Katie Britt. So we're going to get right to the show. Got lots of questions. This is going to be very entertaining. As always, our show is brought to you by my sponsor, my investigator, Spy for Rent. Spy for Rent. Jamie Hammock and Corey Fuller are the names to know for investigators in the state of Alabama, and they are the exclusive investigators for my firm. So, Congressman Moore, how are you today, sir?
Joe, I'm good. Thank you for having me on with you. I hope you didn't oversell us, but I think we're going to do a good job. I think it'll be enjoyable.
I am so looking forward to this. We had Steve Marshall last week, and so I teased it up last week that you would be here. We joked before we came on air. I said I was hoping you would be here because I didn't check in with you this week. Thank God you're here.
Well, Alex had it on the calendar, and we try to stick to our commitments as best we can.
Oh, that's good. Okay, so tell North Alabama, the people that you haven't gotten to meet yet, that listen to talk radio, a little bit about you, your history, and how you got here, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I grew up on a farm in South Alabama, a little area called Batten's Crossroads, Alabama, and went to Auburn, got an ag science degree, and worked in the world of Elanco animal health and all of that for a couple of years around the country. I was in Wisconsin and Mississippi, and then 25 years ago, we started a garbage company. I tell everybody the transition from garbage to politics is pretty easy to make, and so I still have my CDLs. My health card's expired, but so really I ran a business, and I kind of realized that often the government wasn't coming alongside. It was riding on the back of small business owners. And so, we built that company. We've been blessed. And the party came to me in 2006 and said, Barry, would you run for state legislature? And my kids were young. My business was young. And I said, no, I don't have any desire to be in politics. I don't care for that world. And 2008, Barack Obama said we're no longer a Christian nation. And I told my wife, Heather, I said, if they ever ask us again to engage, we probably need to seriously consider it. And so 2010, the party came along. They were looking to get that first Republican majority since the Civil War in Alabama, since Reconstruction. And they said, would you run? And so Heather and I decided at that point that we would run. We became part of that first class, the Republican majority in Alabama, and went to the state house and got a reputation as being one of the most conservative guys there. Out of 105 House members and 35 senators, I was always ranked in the top 1 or 2 as conservative voters.
Very good. And so how did you get from being in the state house to running for United States Congress?
So interesting story, Joe. In 2014, they came after the top conservatives. There is a thing in Montgomery called the Matrix. We call it the swamp in D.C. So the Matrix came after us, and I was one of the 2 top conservative guys got indicted. And they literally, I was a General Flynn before there was a General Flynn. They literally indicted me. And the deal was like, cut a deal, walk away from politics, and your life will go back to normal. And so I was talking to my attorneys on the phone one day, And they said, Barry, you probably should cut a deal, says, because, you know, you can walk away from this thing, probably no harm, no foul, cut a proffer deal. And I hung up with my attorneys, and they were all very high-paid attorneys, some of the names you'd recognize if I told you, and walked over to the carport. My 12-year-old son, Jeb, he was 12 at the time. I said, hey, buddy, I said, we probably going to have to walk away from this thing. I said, because if we fight it, they're going to destroy us financially. They're going to destroy us politically. They're going to destroy us personally. And he said, Dad, I've been reading the book of Daniel. He said, when all those men bowed, there were men who stood. So we as a family made a decision that we would win the case and we would win the race. And so as a Republican in Alabama, I was literally running under felony indictment as a conservative in my district and won by double digits because the people knew us. And then we went to trial October of 2014 and won that case. So what General Flynn went through, what our family went through, when I realized that the government does weaponize against its political enemies, we experienced that as a family. But through that process, the Lord did such a great work in my heart that I decided, I said, you know, I'm going to do whatever he calls me to do. I'm going to be a bondservant to Christ until I meet him. And so in 2015, Donald Trump came to Mobile, Alabama. It was his first stadium event. And Heather and I were in a bus on the south end of Lad Peoples Stadium. Trump had come down the Golden Escalator, and he decided he would do his first event at Lad Peoples in Mobile. And so Heather and I were in a bus on the south end of that stadium, and a fellow with Trump, Alabama, knocked on the door and said, would any of you guys be willing to endorse Donald Trump today? Well, again, that was above my pay grade. So Heather and I went down the hall and said a prayer, and we literally got a piece about endorsing this guy from New York City. Now, the conventional wisdom was there's 17 in the primary. I mean, we had Rubio coming to Alabama. We had Walker. They all wanted these endorsements from state legislators to build momentum within the states for their presidential run. And so Heather and I got this piece about endorsing this guy. It didn't make any sense. And we were going through the tunnel, Joe. And a buddy of mine looked at me and said, there's only 4. There were 30,000 people there that day. Said, only 4 guys going to endorse today. Says, Barry, do you want to go first? Do you want to go last? And I said, well, Ed, I guess I'll go first. And so as we were going through the tunnel, Jump, the song off the 1984 album, that was the year I graduated high school. Great song off the best album Van Halen ever released, in my humble opinion. And 30,000 people were screaming Trump. And I thought, man, this is a different kind of movement, you know, but we'd already committed to endorse. So went out and became the first elected official in the nation to endorse him as President of the United States 11 years ago. And so it's funny because when I told Trump that story at Mar-a-Lago, he's like, why did you do that? I said, I don't know, sir. I had a piece about that thing. I thought you were the man for this time in the nation. And so we went out and look, I had friends of mine that were in the world of politics. They were like, what are you doing? I said, guys, I just think I'm where I need to be on this. And so literally we were the first in the nation to endorse him. And we've been in the fight with him for 11 years. Mm. And it was his team that asked us to run for Congress. That's how I'm in this mess I'm in today. I'm in Congress running for the U.S. Senate because Trump's team said, hey, man, we need you to have our back in D.C. We need some guys that we know we can trust because it's tough in the swamp. It's tough in the matrix to find people that will stand with you when the pressure is on. And when you face 40 years in prison, brother, there ain't no vote on the floor of the House going to ever make you walk away. You're going to do what you think is right because we have been through the refiner's fire.
Very good. We're talking with United States Congressman Barry Moore. He's going to be with us today. I want to ask you a lot of questions. First of all, how do you feel about term limits for congressional members of the House and the Senate?
Yeah, I've signed a term limit pledge. Actually, I'll be the only guy in this race that has served in a legislative body and walked away from 2 guaranteed reelects. So in the state legislature, I served 2 terms, and I thought that was enough. I had enough fun in 14. I'm like, I want to do this anymore. And then, you know, to go and be elected to Congress, you know, like I know, Joe, those guys can stay there for a long, long time. And so when this Senate seat opened, I could have sit tight where I was at. But I thought it was more important that the president have people that have his back at the highest level in government to help him fight the fight that we need to fight to move America First agenda across the finish line. So I'm not looking for a job. I've got one. But when the calling is there and you feel led to do something, you do that. You walk in obedience. And Psalms 119:105 says, our word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. And for me, a lamp doesn't give you a lot of down-the-road illumination. You kind of have to make that next step of faith. And so for me, I've always signed the term limits pledge. I think it's a good thing. I think there has to be some caveats because you don't want the lobbyists to stay there forever and a bunch of freshmen coming in being led around by the nose. You see that happen all the time, and they know how to apply pressure. And so there has to be some ways that we address it. But, yeah, I've always signed that, and I think we should – and I actually came up with a plan. I'm on the term limits caucus in Washington, D.C., and I didn't know how popular this would be, but back in the day, these old boys that served, they could take their campaign money and go to the House. And I always thought, well, you know what? That's like a golden parachute in the corporate world or in the political world, where if this guy's got donor money and we can get him to go to the House, then it'd probably be a good way to get him to go to the House, because it's not taxpayer money. And that would probably cause a lot of these guys to term limit themselves. But getting a vote on it, getting them to vote for that, it's going to be difficult. But I think there's a way that you could structure it. But yeah, I think the problem is some of those people have been there way too long. Some of them literally die in the chamber, and that's way past your useful life to me in politics. And you don't need staff. Some of these folks get so old that staff really runs their office. Yeah. They're not leading on policy. They're not thinking through policy. They're being told what to do. And those are unelected bureaucrats that run that process.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, because I haven't ever had a chance to meet you. A lot of congressmen that go up to D.C., they live in their offices while they're in session. Do you do that? Because I was reading about somebody this morning that did that.
Yeah, I got a dear friend, Jim Jordan. He lives in his office. Right. And even when Polly's in town, they stay in his office. But Jim does it for security reasons. He doesn't get off the Hill because there are some crazies up there. And I managed to get him to go to dinner with me one night off the Hill about 2 blocks from the Capitol Hill. I'm like, come on, man, come eat with us. And so he put on a cap, and I almost didn't recognize him. He came in the door, and I was like, I told Heather, oh, there's Jim right there, but I almost didn't recognize him. But there are. I have a roommate, a U.S. Senator from North Carolina that's my roommate, him and his wife, and my wife travels with me too. So we've got some places right off the Hill that some of us rent, and that works out good. But yeah, there's still a few guys that stay in their offices.
Yeah, I've heard that's pretty common up there.
It is, and then look, I mean, these guys are making a little bit of money. I mean, that's $174,000 a year. But if you couple that, if they got kids in college and they got a mortgage in their home state and they're trying to pay high price rent in D.C. and pay high price food costs, it makes it tough financially. We have a lot of guys that leave when their kids get to college, and I'm not saying that's the right or wrong thing to do, but because financially it's tough on the guys that are doing it right. Some of us need to figure out the Ilhan Omar plan. How do you go to net worth of $15 million in 5 years? We don't know. All of ours is going the wrong way, and some of these people. But there are guys that struggle. I mean, and they've got, some of them got young kids too. So it's difficult. It's difficult to maintain 2 households if they got a mortgage in their state, and so there are some of the guys that stay in their office just to save money.
Yeah, and there are. You're talking about that. Nancy Pelosi came out a couple of years ago. I think it was right after COVID, and they passed some new legislation. I mean, there are people on congressional staffs that make more than the United States congressman or the United States senator.
Yeah, there are actually. We have chiefs of staff that make more than the members themselves.
Yeah,
and what they'll do, there may be a cap on it, but they'll subsidize sometimes out of the campaign account because your chief may work both fronts. But yeah, they're literally staff and a lot of people that don't have the authority, the weight of the world on their shoulders that make more than many of the members.
Yeah. So, Congressman Moore, let me ask you about the First Amendment, freedom of religion, and some legislation you entered recently about Sharia law in America Act. Talk a little bit about that. What's your stance on religion in America as a congressman?
Yeah, so the thing with Sharia law is it's in direct opposition to the Constitution, especially when there are certain things that our Constitution protects. And you can't have 2 laws in the same land. And what we're seeing in Europe with the invasion in Europe is London and Paris, they're in a bad way. And Islam is a threat to this nation. And because there are literally, if you go to places like Dearborn, Michigan, they actually have their own law enforcement. And the U.S. law, the local law won't go into those regions. And so a concern for us is that you can't have a law that you're enforcing that is direct contradiction to the Constitution of the United States. And so for us, I'm in the Sharia-free caucus. I mean, it's okay to practice your religion, but don't try to bring a law in the land that's totally contradictory to the law that we have, that we've been working under for 250 years, and try to say that, yeah, we're going to enforce this and not enforce your laws. And so there's so many rights that are violated through Sharia law, certainly women's rights. There's a lot of free speech issues. There's a lot of freedom of religion issues that Sharia law directly contradicts the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah. The problem for me is all the people that we've led in this country that I get offended when I'm watching TV, and they're swinging their flags of their country, and they're coming here, and it's like they're going to plant the flag on our homeland. And to me, it's like they have no desire to assimilate.
That's right.
They're coming here to use our resources. We spend more money because we have to have ESL teachers in school. They get all kind of thing. They were giving them free cell phones under Biden.
That's right.
When they walked in, and I'm thinking, what in the world are we all working for in this happening?
Yeah. And so I've been to the border 3 different times because when I first got to D.C., Joe Biden was sworn in, and I'd got into D.C. in 2020. And the thing that I noticed was Andy Biggs, who was an Arizona senator running for governor out there. He's in House Freedom Caucus. So the House Freedom Caucus guys, we started making trips to the border. We were trying to bring attention to the invasion that was going on the southern border. And I literally was talking to the law enforcement and hospital administrators in that border town, and they were getting free cell phones, $800 a month, and then we were sending them, busing them, flying them, and it didn't matter. They didn't test them for COVID, brother. They put them on an airplane or a bus and sent them to some city somewhere. And they literally would take our phones, and the story was, well, that way when we call them for their court dates, we can get them for their asylum hearings. But I tell everybody they took our phones but never took our calls. And so that Disney Fast Pass on the U.S. southern border that Biden put in place, and Mayorkas as Secretary of Homeland, it literally just said, used to we had a Remain in Mexico policy where you'd apply for asylum, and when you got a court date, then you would go to the court and have your hearing. They changed all of that. So you come to America, then you apply for asylum. And in addition to that, we had thousands and thousands and millions now, I think 11 million, they think, over that 4-year period. But we have a lot of people on terrorist watch lists, people from different countries. If you were coming, and the cartel were getting filthy rich in the process, they were outflanking us on Biden and all his goofy moves on the border. And so the cartel, if you were just south of the border, and this was the prices in 22, thereabouts, it was like you pay the Mexican cartel about $5,000. And you could come from Mexico. But if you were in South America, it was about $8,000. If you were coming from Russia, it was $19,000. Chinese were paying $80,000 to the cartel to get smuggled in. And so we went to south of the U.S. southern border, and I can't tell you the number of IDs that are thrown down in Mexico before they get to the border because they didn't want us to know who was coming here. And so we know over 300 on the terrorist watch list that are in this country. That don't count the gotaways. And so we have cells within this country. And people, like you said, either coming for the free ride, not contributing. And the Constitution doesn't require us to take any immigrants, only if they benefit the nation. And somehow or another, Biden just opened it up. And it was a way, I think, because I think the Democratic Party realizes they are losing their base in this country. And so they're trying to replace their own voters with illegals. And that's why the SAVE Act is such a fight right now. But, yeah, the border and what happened, and I actually had a 31-year-old, I think he was from Venezuela, it might have been Guatemala, that raped a 14-year-old girl in a restaurant in my district. Mm-hmm. He qualified. He said he was a minor. Well, the Biden administration didn't check. The guy was 31 years old. So these unaccompanied minors, many of them, there's thousands of them. We lost 300,000 children, but some of those weren't children. And so we had this huge mess created by Biden that now we are trying to clean up. And the media calls you cruel, but that was an invasion. When they're waving another country's flag, that's not immigration, my friend. That's an invasion.
Yeah. Talking with the United States Congressman Barry Moore. You brought it up, so we'll go ahead and go there. Let's talk about the SAVE Act legislation. Is it likely to pass before the midterms or not? I mean,
well, we're in a position right now, and we're fighting this fight with the on the Hill. Let me just put it that way. I don't know who's on which side of this thing. But we have passed 11 of the 12 approach bills. And if we can get number 12, which they're holding up DHS funding because they're wanting to open the border back up. And that's why the Custom Border, ICE, all those guys, the Democrats tried to carve that out of the last DHS approach. We would have literally have done 12 approach for the first time in 3 decades in this nation. Regular order bills that came through committee that were voted out of the House that went to the Senate. This is the first time we've seen them try to carve up an approach bill and kind of neuter for special interest groups. But the Save America Act, we think what we're going to do, and we're working through this. We had a call yesterday, is we're going to do a reconciliation 3.0, and we're going to try to put some of the elements in there that help us do some of the Save America Act in reconciliation so we don't have to have that 60-vote majority in the Senate. We think we can get some of that done. But it just goes to show you, I mean, if you look at the polling on this, you know it's true. I mean, 82% of Hispanics think we ought to have a voter ID, 86% Black America, or no, I'm sorry, 84% I think of Black America, 86% of white America. But it doesn't matter what party they're in. They all agree that U.S. citizens should vote in U.S. elections. So the Democrats, as they were shuffling these people into the country and wanting to count those illegals in the census, they're also trying to figure out a way to let them vote without an ID so they can truly, truly cancel out American voters in American elections.
What are your thoughts on we've got a partial shutdown of the government, and Congress takes a recess for Easter, and not picking at you personally, I'm talking about as an institution. We got people working at the airports. We are in the middle of a war. It's not an excursion, it's a war. I don't care what you call it right now. They only have to be right once. They only have to be right once, the terrorists. Mm-hmm. We have to be right every time.
Every day.
What are your thoughts on our TS agents not getting paid and Congress goes on vacation?
Yeah, so the House, the Congress, the U.S. House, we passed that approach bill 4 different times and sent it to the Senate. And then at 3 a.m., they dropped it back in our lap, cutting out the funding for ICE and CBP to open the border back up. And we refused to do that. So we sent it back to the Senate in a CR, and they didn't do it. So now that's why we're negotiating the reconciliation. But we think we've had Roosevelt, he's the OMB director, yesterday on the call. We've got some money in the big, beautiful bill to pay TSA and many of those folks right up through about May, late May. But President Trump was able to find some money to get TSA, and then he brought ICE in. I came out of New York. I come out of D.C. The ICE agents are doing a heck of a job, but they're just kind of backfilling for TSA. But it shows you the level that the Democratic Party will go to punish the American people if they don't get their way. And again, this is an 85% issue. It's not like we're a 51, 48, 49 issue. This is something every American citizen wants. But Schumer and his crowd, Fetterman's the only one making any sense right now. Schumer and his crowd will literally shut you down. They will punish the American people trying to travel in airports so that they get their way on this thing. But the fight is worth having, and we're going to have that fight, and we're going to continue to fight because the American people expect that. Even the Democratic Party wants voter ID. So we're not going to let you cripple and open the border back up just to get your way on voter ID stuff. And so we're trying to figure out how to couple all that together, Joe. But, yeah, I mean, as soon as they call us, if they get an agreement, we're back. But right now we send it to the Senate. We're like, y'all fix this.
There's a rumor, rumor mills. There's a rumor why Schumer would not cut a deal, and it was because he was so worried about being primaried by AOC for the Senate. There ain't truth to that, or is there that?
No, I think that's real. I think that if you watch Mom Donnie when he got elected in New York, and that AOC is a communist socialist running to the left of him, and that party has been so hijacked, I think that Schumer will play politics and put his political career, far ahead of the American people, and I think he is afraid of AOC in some kind of way. And so we'll see. I that is the rumor. I've heard that to be the same rumor you hear. I hear it on the Hill. So Schumer he is putting the American. I think if he would step up and actually put the American people first, he'd have a better shot than what he's doing right now.
Very interesting. We're talking with the United States Congressman Barry Moore. Let me ask you, before we get into a lot of the subjects we talked about before we got on air, you get to see these people every day on the left. Oh, we're going to break. All right. When we come back after break, we're going to talk about the people on the left that you see every day that we saw at the State of the Union address. Are they really that nutty in person as they appear on TV? You're listening to the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. We got United States Congressman Barry Moore in the house. You want to stick around and listen to this conversation. We'll be back after news and weather.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. Joe is a 20-year veteran of the Alabama courts specializing in criminal defense and family law. If you need a private legal consultation, email Joe at joeingramlaw.com. And now, welcome back to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram.
All right, you're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. We got United States Congressman Barry Moore of the 1st District of Alabama. He's in the House. He's running for the United States Senate on the Republican ticket. He's got opposition. Steve Marshall, Jared Hudson are formidable opponents for the primary. Right before we went to break, my teaser question was, Congressman Moore, were you at the State of the Union address this year?
I was.
Okay. And you're up on the Hill. You get to see these people. You get to interact with them. For the most of us that watch on a TV screen, are these people as nutty in person as they come across on TV?
You know, for the most part, they are, Joe. And I think that was probably one of the most shocking things for me. When I was in the state legislature, I served 2 terms there, and my best friend was a black female Democrat. And I was a business owner, and she was a social worker. And we would sit on small business and commerce, and I literally she would ask me, how's this going to impact business? And we'd have those dialogues as we were voting and conversations. And so you get to D.C., January 6th, my 3rd day on the job. Pelosi puts us all in masks, starts making us vote in shifts because of COVID. But the crazy thing was, over in the Senate, where they're a little older than us, when you got through the dome and the rotunda of the Capitol, they weren't wearing masks. So none of the Senate Dems were doing any of that. Pelosi was literally forcing us to wear a mask, go through a metal detector because of January 6th, and then fining us $500. We went to the floor every time without a mask on, and I got my fair share of fines. But it was because it was political, and the party, and I think the problem is, and it goes with gerrymandering and redistricting, very often they draw these districts up for Democrats to win or Republicans to win, and what happens is you end up somebody runs to the left of the Democrats or to the right of the Republicans, and for us in District 1, that's great. It's the 6th most conservative district in the nation, so I'm happy to serve that district. But what happens is there's such a huge divide, and the tyranny that Pelosi put on the Republicans and the way that Biden and those guys executed their policies. I mean, the Inflation Reduction Act was a joke, right? I mean, they called it Inflation Reduction Act. They're going to spend $2 trillion more a year, and then 86,000 new IRS agents to come after all the small business owners while the border was wide open. And they were punishing us for COVID and letting people come across the border, running fevers and shipping them into cities. So, yeah, it is truly divided. And I serve on the Judiciary Committee, and it's a fascinating committee to be on. But I dealt with Adam Schiff, I dealt with Cori Bush. Who was it from Texas? Just got beat out there in that primary? Jasmine Crockett. I mean, we have those people, and they're really it's scary because I think in many ways, maybe not Schumer, maybe not some of those guys, they're doing it for political purposes. But I think some of these people actually believe that socialism and communism is the best path forward. If they'll just look at history, they'll see that is not the right direction. But they're being pulled to the left. And so I have a few friends on the other side of the aisle that they'll come to we have a bipartisan prayer breakfast. There's a few of those guys that'll come that I'm friends with. But I still don't understand how they can vote lockstep sometimes with some of the leftist policies, and they know that can't be the right thing to do. And, so, yeah, it's very divided, and there are some crazies in that part of the world, and we deal with them on a regular basis.
I saw a poll recently when you bring up New York and Mandani. And I think this has a lot to do with the younger generations that younger than me. And you and I are pretty close to the same age. They took a poll, roughly 30% of people are willing to embrace socialism in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
Have you heard that? Have you heard that number, or have you heard about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was concerned. I mean, in the years past, Heather and I taught youth Sunday school for years, and we love young people, but I was concerned at a lot of, and I don't know if it's what they were getting off TikTok and all that, But there was a lot of them that seemed to think that, capitalism's bad and socialism's great and everybody's going to be living, it's going to be pie in the sky kind of stuff. But one thing that has encouraged me, and it's been the Charlie Kirk movement. I got Turning Point's endorsement last week or maybe a week before. But, those young people, to me, Joe, could very well save this country. But there is a movement now, and even I saw it with even my son's friends. My daughter, Kathleen, when she was at Auburn, she was the youngest voting Trump delegate in the nation. The year I endorsed Trump, she ran as a delegate in Lee County, and she was frustrated because she saw a bunch of Bernie Sanders bumper stickers. So even at that point, and that's been 6-7 years ago maybe, that there was a more move to the left among college kids and certainly the woke universities, and then they were indoctrinating our kids instead of educating them. But my son, Jeb, just finished up at Auburn a year or two ago, and he had buddies from New York and Ohio and all over that were conservatives that were coming to those conservative universities. And I think Charlie Kirk and Turning Point has done something. And that generation now, I think the pendulum is swinging back. And I think, there's going to be those kids that go to New York University or whatever, and they are Harvard or Yale or Columbia or whatever that may be indoctrinated, but I can tell you, there's hope for that generation, and I tell them all the time, I said, you are going to save this country, because there really is a movement afoot, I think, to swing back, and I'm excited to see that, and so I'm encouraged in some kind of way, but there was a time in there that I was really concerned about what the direction of the young people in this nation, and having not ever worked in the world and experienced it much, they were just being taught by these college professors that capitalism's bad, socialism's the ticket, and we have that in academia. We have that in media very often. And certainly when they're on social media, the TikTok, that sort of stuff, I think sometimes they were being pulled more to the left. But I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing, Joe. And I hope that we keep seeing those folks come on board that are MAGA, that love this country and don't mind waving the American flag and do what they need to do to celebrate the greatness of this nation.
What are your thoughts about we have a deficit of $39 trillion roughly today. What's your philosophy on fiscal money policy in our country? What do you think about where we do, and what do we do?
Yeah, so it's a big question with a lot of interesting dynamics, but it's $39 trillion, and the last I saw, the debt clock was $105,000 a second. The interest on that, it's more than that now. That's been a few months ago. But in the big beautiful bill, we cut $1.5 trillion in spending, and we're starting to put the downward pressure on spending. And the more conservatives we elect, I got 100 with Heritage this past week, or yesterday, I think they released that. And so there are those of us in the House Freedom Caucus that are constantly negotiating to pull the conference to the right on spending. And we've been able to do a good bit of that. And I think that to the fraud that we've uncovered in California, thanks to Nick Shirley in Minneapolis, the things that we're seeing, Scott Bessent thinks that $1 trillion a year is fraud. And so now that J.D. Vance has been handed off, and I saw some arrests this morning, he's been handed the responsibility to clean up the fraud. I think J.D. will do a good job. There is the GDP as we grow it, and as we put downward pressure on spending, we need to be at about 3.8% of that number. We were at 6.2 before the big beautiful bill. We got it down to 5.8, I think. And so we're trying to, as we grow the economy, we're trying to get that number to coalesce, and we can balance it. It's going to take some time. We didn't get this way overnight, and these politicians for years have been buying people's votes with dollars, and certainly the money we're giving to illegals that are coming here. You and I talked about $800 a month in free phones, and never mind putting them up in expensive hotels in New York City. So that kind of stuff. Now that we've sealed the border off, I think we're putting downward pressure on spending. We're trying to clean up the fraud. I think there is an opportunity for us to grow out of this mess with GDP and cutting spending, but it needs to be a bipartisan, not a bipartisan. It needs to be a two-pronged approach to that.
Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar, being on the Hill, North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis. You know him, right?
I do.
And he's not running for re-election. And he and Senator Kennedy crucified Kristi Noem a couple weeks ago in a hearing, maybe rightly so, over some issues. And Tom Tillis has come out, and he has said there will be no nomination vote for federal Kevin Warsh for the Federal Reserve Chairman until the investigation ends on Jerome Powell. You're aware of all this, right?
Yeah.
All right. And, Jerome Powell's term ends up in May. We're getting really close now. We're in April. Do you think this is an issue that the DOJ just needs to punt on so we can get rid? Because Powell came out this week and did an interview. I don't know if you saw it. And he says, because I brought this up last week. I wasn't sure what would happen. He says, I'm going to stay on as pro tem of the Federal Reserve until you get somebody else in place. He came out and announced it this week. So what's your thoughts on this? Because you might be in the Senate with this.
Yeah, so I think that you have a point. I think, Joe, punt on the investigation for the time being. Let's get a new chairman in place, and then down the road, if there needs to be an investigation, that would be the time to hold out. We need to move. We need to move fast on what we're doing, and I think Powell's held rates way too high based on inflationary numbers we saw. We kept it at 1.7% the last 3 months of last year, and so inflation's down. Interest rates should be following that pretty quickly, and if we can't let Tillis and those guys hold it up because there's an open investigation. I think it makes sense to close the door on that for the time being, get somebody in place that can help manage our interest rates, manage the Federal Reserve, and let's get this economy back up and going because we're primed. I think we're in a good spot. The things we're doing, the offshore investment in this country based on President Trump said in the history of the nation, we'd only seen $3 trillion in 12 months invested onshore, and we got $18 trillion committed coming to this country. We're seeing industry grow in Alabama. Obviously, we just did Hadrian last weekend. That's 1,000 new jobs. You got Novellis's $4 billion investment down in Baldwin County, be go close to $5 billion. Lilly just announced $6 billion in North Alabama. So the things that we can do as there's a golden age of America, there can be a golden age of Alabama, but interest rates are part of that process. Obviously, there's some other things, but yeah, we don't need to let Tillis be the spoiler just because he's mad at President Trump.
Well, I think for him, it's all theatrics and politics. He doesn't want an open investigation against an independent Federal Reserve chair over some testimony he might have given about the cost of the building being over budget or whatever. So it just seems like we just need to punt on that and get on to the next phase of what we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot hold the country hostage over one individual because of one hearing over some cost of some building when the nation is languishing with high interest rates when inflation is down.
Yeah. What do you hear up in Washington on the Hill? I read lots of stuff, and when I say read, I read lots of stuff. I read everything from England, Beijing, Asia, Dalio over the Gulf states. What are you hearing about? There's a lot of people out there thinking that we're going to go to a government cryptocurrency. I mean, have you heard about that?
Yeah, CBDC.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've fought every step of the way. We don't ever need the government controlling the finances. One of the things that people may not realize on blockchain and crypto, actually President Trump was debanked right after the 2020 election. They took the big corporate banks pulled him down. And so they had to go to crypto to make payroll, to do the things they needed to do to run their business. You don't ever want the government controlling that because it was Biden that made the calls to the big banks that debanked the Trump family. And so we cannot have a CBDC. We cannot ever have the federal government in that space because once they control our money, they control us. And so there is a way that blockchain you can have guardrails on it, and we want that investment here in the U.S., and we want us to lead in that process. But we don't ever want the government to have a say in the marketplace in a sense that they actually control the currency that you would need to buy, sell, and trade with. That is scary stuff. And so, there are those that would like that, but there's those of us in the HFC and other areas that say absolutely not. That will not happen on our watch.
Okay. Well, I feel a little better, I think, for the moment.
Yeah, me too, just for the moment. It's just always a battle, right? I mean, it's always a battle. The government creep, the control is always there.
Yeah. What are your thoughts regarding I've got so many questions I want to hit you with.
Go easy on me, Joe. Go easy on me.
No. This is easy. We had an opportunity during Trump's first administration. We were really close to getting rid of Obamacare. Came down to John McCain.
Yeah, I never forget that.
The famous,
never forget that thumb down.
Famous come down, put the thumb down, right? Do you think there's ever a chance that might get revisited, or do you think that there's so much going on that we're past that?
No, I think we have to revisit it. I mean, the healthcare cost Obamacare was actually insurance. It wasn't about healthcare. And, President Trump, to his credit, the most favored nation status on prescription drugs is helping drive down the cost and it was interesting when President Trump approached the pharmaceutical companies, they were like, sir, you'll have to get the other nations to approve that. And so one of the nations was holding up, and I don't remember the name of the country. He told us, and I can't remember for sure, but I think, I don't want to say because I don't know for sure, but the nations had to approve out the U.S. to be most favored. And the way that President Trump tells the story, he's got a friend of his from New York that was taking the fat shot, he called it. And he was buying it in the U.S. for $1,200, and he could go to Europe and buy it for like $110. And so President Trump got to look and says, why is this? Because America doesn't get most favored nation status. So we were subsidizing the drug costs for other nations on the back of American citizens. And so President Trump, and they're like, well, sir, we don't think we can do that. And he told the president of that country, he said, if you don't do it, it's a 200% tariff. He said, sir, we'll be glad to have you guys most favored nation status. So what happened is Trump was able to negotiate drug costs downward tremendously. So we're not subsidizing other countries. In addition to that, we do have to address, because the insurance companies are getting filthy rich, and healthcare, the quality of care is going down, the premiums are going up, the deductibles are going up. So it wasn't really ever about the American people and their health, but it was a way for Obama and those guys, I think, to control that process. You control the money, you control the health, you control the food, you control the American people. And so we've already passed a bill out of the House that's in the Senate that would help with some of that. But again, you got this filibuster issue. And so it has to be addressed, and it's not going down if we don't fix it. And the government created the problem with Obamacare. We need to absolutely fix it. And so I'm cautiously optimistic. We're doing some other things, but I think you ought to be able to customize health care plans. You ought to be able to sell across state lines. There are some things we can do. You ought to be able to customize it. I mean, some of these families are paying for maternity care, and they don't need it. I mean, they don't have any children. But because the plans are not customizable and there's not a competitive market for the premiums, then you have these crazy crazy premium rates. And like I said, they don't really care because it's almost like the fox guard in the hen house with these insurance companies. You got a doctor, you go see him about something. He says, here's what we need to do. And then they call up one of the insurance companies, and you got a young person that doesn't have any medical training looking at the board going, well, no, we can't approve that. But your physician just said you need it. So that's the problem. We've got to make it more free market, less government driven. And I think there are ways that we can do that. And again, on the pharmaceutical side, we're already working on that on Most Favored Nation. We've got that fixed.
Very good. We're talking with United States Congressman Barry Moore. He's running for United States Senate on the Republican side of the ticket. Well, we'll just go ahead and jump to some of the big subjects I want to talk about. What are your thoughts on elections? And we've already talked about a little bit about voter ID. Do you think that we're going to have a problem with this election, because there's a lot of talk out there that the reason the bill is being passed is to have voter fraud?
You're talking about the Save America Act?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we certainly need to get that across the finish line. Like I said, I think there'll be parts of that in Reconciliation 3.0, but there is a great deal of fraud. And it was fascinating. There was a Democrat colleague giving a speech this week in a mostly minority crowd, and he said, hey, he was talking about the SAVE Act and how it was going to discriminate against people who didn't have IDs. Yeah, and he was like, raise your hand if you don't have a voter ID or you don't have an ID. Not a single person in the room raised their hand, and this was primarily a Democrat crowd. And I think he was shocked by that, but I think that's the narrative they try to drive, that we're going to disenfranchise. The only people being disenfranchised right now is a U.S. citizen whose vote is canceled out by a person who's not a U.S. citizen. And that's the real fight. And I think that's why, at some point we've got to look at this and go, look, you and I talked a little bit off air, but I think we got to address this filibuster issue. If we really want to get America First agenda done between now and November, I think we need to look at blowing the filibuster up for now. The Dems are going to do it, and move that agenda. Am I jumping ahead of you, Joe?
I want to come back to that. All right, something I want to ask you about, because you don't get many chances to ask somebody that's on the Hill at the moment in time. Swalwell.
Oh man.
In the last week or two, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
What's the real skinny there Fang Fang running for governor of California. I think he tried to sue the FBI this week, or maybe I saw that story. Maybe I'm wrong on that one, because he's afraid they're going to release some stuff related to that. I mean,
yeah. And so Swalwell's on Judiciary Committee with me, and he's not one of my favorite people. Honestly, he was actually mixed up with a Chinese spy, and Fang Fang was her name. And so I think that during the investigative process, maybe they're going to release some stuff. I don't know. I think they always talk about transparency until it's on them. And so we'll see. But, I think he's threatening to sue. But I think that the American people have a right to know if we had a U.S. congressman that was compromised in any kind of way with a Chinese spy that's now running for governor of California. I think we need to know about that. I think we need to know what was going on there. So I think they always threaten to sue. That's it seems to be the standard operating procedure. I mean, Trump will threaten to sue you too if you're doing something. And so it's not just one side, but I think Swalwell's trying to intimidate those folks to not get the truth out. But I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll know more about that. But we knew about Fang Fang. We've known about that for 3 years now.
Yeah, when that story first came out, what little I remember is there was a meeting, and I think it was either the FBI or the CIA, and they came in and they approached Nancy Pelosi because she was Speaker of the House at the time, and they told her about it. And there was a meeting, and then it all just kind of was swept under the rug.
Yeah, and the media is pretty good about sweeping that stuff under the rug for them, and it's like. It literally in D.C. sometimes I feel like we're fighting the swamp, but we're also fighting the media, the bureaucrats. Sometimes within our own party we have a battle, but most of the time the media never talks about that. If that had been a Republican member, man, it'd have been everywhere. They'd have pushed it out, and the individual would have probably been removed from office, or at least there would have been some hearings and some investigations. And so I'm glad to see the DOJ is actually taking a look at that, because this justice thing that we have going on in D.C., where it's one-sided when the Democrats are in control, and we saw that through Judiciary, the Durham report, and we could talk about that later. But I'm going to tell you the stuff that I found in Judiciary Committee, the weaponization of the CIA, the DNI, the FBI, all those agencies, the IRS, where they came after Trump and his friends, and even those of us who are conservative. They seized phones of members of House Freedom Caucus. They doxed a lot of our phones. So the fact that and it was all Republicans they were targeting. So that tells you that it was political. And so, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Pelosi swept it under the rug, it went away. And then, of course, the media doesn't do any investigation. They don't put it out there because they're not for us. They're establishment.
Before I get to that question, I got to ask you really fast because you brought it up. Jim Jordan, supposedly they were wiretapping his phones from can't think of his name, the special investigator.
Jack Smith.
Thank you. Sometimes I can't remember names. What are your thoughts on members of Congress having their phones being wiretapped, subpoenaing their cell phone records to see who they're talking to?
Yeah, that just tells you that Jack Smith and that whole DOJ under Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray, the FBI, Clapper, Brennan, DNI, CIA, all those guys were working to target anybody who were in Trump's sphere of influence, anybody he had conversations with. And never forget that Scott Perry, chairman of House Freedom Caucus, was on a vacation. The FBI stopped him. He had his wife and 2 daughters in the car and seized his phone. And so they came after us in a way. And look, when Durham came in and he was testifying in Judiciary, and Durham's a lifelong law enforcement guy. I said, Mr. Durham, you said in your report there were some things you found that were sobering. I said, do you mind elaborating on what it was that was concerning to you, considering the U.S., the federal arm of investigation and law enforcement? He said, one of the most sobering things, he says, was Barack Obama was sitting in the Oval Office, Joe Biden was the vice president, Loretta Lynch was the attorney general, and James Comey was the FBI director at the time. Clapper, Brennan walk in and go, hey, guys, just so y'all know, there's this Russian collusion thing that the DNC is putting out, that they're paying apparently Christopher Steele, this former MI6 guy, to put this dossier together on Donald Trump. And just so y'all know, that's not real and that's fake, but just be aware. 48 hours, Comey leaves there and taps Michael Flynn's cell phone. The Russian collusion narrative, the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, all started with every single leader of the Democratic Party, the most powerful positions in government in this nation, knowing that it was a false narrative. And yet they still, the whole election cycle, the whole time, they were targeting Trump, General Flynn. They even arrested Trump's, his chauffeur. I mean, they arrested everybody. And when you think about what they put Trump through and members of Congress, I don't know what Scott Perry spent on legal fees, but it's like I told you earlier, they'll destroy you politically, personally, and financially if they can do it. And they have unlimited resources. And when you think about President Trump, he was impeached twice. 91 days before a midterm, they raided his home. We've never had a president arrested. We hadn't had a home raided. They went into Melania's closet. They went to Barron's closet 91 days before a midterm to send a message. And then in addition to that, he spent $76 million on legal fees. He's got 96 felony indictments. And all of that was a part of a process to punish a man who the American people elected to be president of the United States.
All right, we're talking very more fascinating conversation. We'll be back after news and weather. Stay tuned. He's going to be with us for the next hour. We'll be back.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. Joe is a 20-year veteran of the Alabama courts specializing in criminal defense and family law. If you need a private legal consultation, email Joe at joeingramlaw.com. And now, welcome back to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram.
All right, you listen to Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, your Alabama lawyer on WERC 105.5 FM, Birmingham, WBHP in Huntsville, WRTR in Tuscaloosa. We are so fortunate today because we've had United States Congressman Barry Moore from the 1st District of Alabama. He's running for the United States Senate as a Republican, and he agreed to stay for the second hour. I didn't kidnap him. I was kidding, folks. I joked with him before the show, and they're pushed for time because it's the weekend and he's having to do 100 commitments. He said, yeah, we'll do it real fast. So we're back with Congressman Barry Moore. Data centers. I've had a lot of candidates on this year running for statewide office, Public Service Commission, governors, data centers in the country. What are your thoughts about data centers?
You know, I think that we obviously want to lead the way in that technology. It's not something that's going to go away. It's like anything else. America needs to lead on that. Now, there are good ways to do that. Concern is water, obviously, and energy. Arkansas just did a deal, and I mentioned this to some of the leaders in the state legislature of Alabama, where they actually bought modular energy generation for the location. So what happened, they generate their energy for the operation, and then they sell the energy back to the grid. So people's premiums will actually come down because of supply and demand. And so the deal is they're going to Arkansas with this one, and they've got so much advanced technology now. They're literally taking sewer water, running it to the data center. Instead of the cities having to maintain and filter the water, the data centers maintain it, clean it, use it for cooling, and send it back cleaner than the city water treatment facilities. So there are ways that this can be done, and we want to make sure that we don't hinder that, because you don't want China having all the AI data. You don't want them to have the control. It's like TikTok. We don't want them to have the control of the technology, and it's coming. You're not going to stop it. But how do we do it that it does the least impact on American people? And certainly if it lowers energy and makes cleaner water, but also helps us lead in technology, those are the spots that we want to try to hit. And so I made our state legislative guys aware that, hey, there are ways to negotiate deals with Google or whoever's doing it to make sure that you get a good deal when you land a data center.
But running for office, talking to lots of people, I know down in South Alabama, there's a big concern about some solar panel farms and things. You probably know about that more than me. Are you hearing a lot of questions, people asking you about the concerns about data centers in the state?
You know, a little bit, and I'm not a fan of these solar farms, because I think if you take away the subsidies and the Green New Scam, a lot of that stuff would have never happened. And so I think the Biden administration pushed so many things, whether it was deaf on vehicles, auto shutoff, which Lee Zeldin's getting rid of a lot of that, thank goodness. But even on those windmills and solar panels, without the federal tax subsidies, those things would not be competitive. It kind of reminds me when you and I were growing up, Joe. Our parents, when we'd walk out of the house, they'd be like, turn the light off or shut the door. You weren't raised in a barn. And, you know, as a young person, as a 9-year-old boy, I'm like, what difference does the switching flipping the switch or shutting the door make. Now that I'm the dad and I'm paying the bill, I'm like, shut the door and turn the light off. I sound like my parents, but there was an economic incentive for me to do that. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I'm going to do this because it's going to lower the energy usage. But there has to be an economic incentive, and it doesn't need to be subsidized by the taxpayers. It needs to be, if that thing makes sense economically, you do it. If it doesn't, you don't.
Okay. Let's hit some big topics. Steve Marshall's in the race. He's been Attorney General for over 10 years, state of Alabama. President Trump gives you the endorsement to be the senator. Do you feel good about that? Do you feel bad about that? What are your thoughts about that?
We were tickled to death because Trump polls at 85% in Alabama, and having been the first in the nation to endorse him in 2015 when he was running, that was 11 years ago. And so he has seen me in the fight with him. He's seen me, take the arrows and do what I could to help him move America First agenda. American people elected him. I mean, he won every swing state. He won the popular vote. I mean, he is the president for our time. I think he's the man for our time in our nation. And so January 16th, I flew in from D.C. I qualified here in Birmingham, did an event. We had a bunch of interns from the University of Alabama come over. And I'm an Auburn guy, so I have DEI people within my organization. We let Alabama people hang out with us. I'm just kidding. But anyway, they're great volunteers. And so we said, well, we'll take them Dave and Buster's that night for dinner. And so, or for hanging out and pizza and that sort of stuff. Did that. I stayed up way past my bedtime, Joe. And then I drove to Huntsville that night because I was speaking at breakfast at 7 the next morning. Spoke up there, drove back to Shelby County, did another speech, and then went home. And I was tired. I told Heather, I said, baby, I am worn slam out. So I go to bed and my phone is on silent. And President Trump tries to call me 3 times. And it's his mugshot when he calls you. And so it's like literally I missed 3 calls from the President of the United States, and it's his mugshot on my phone. Well, I'm dead asleep. My wife comes running through the house, jumps on the bed, hits me on the chest. I thought she was murdering me in my sleep. And she goes, answer your phone. The president's calling. And I'm coming out of a dead sleep. I'm like, Heather, how do you know the president's calling? She said, answer your phone. The president's calling. And she's like, we can't let him know that we sleep, because he never sleeps. And so I literally pick up my phone, and I see 3 missed calls from POTUS. And so I hit slide on my phone. Natalie Harp, she answers, and she says, Barry, the president would like to speak with you. And so I get on the phone. I'm trying to wake up, and he goes, Barry, because he's from New York. He talks funny. He goes, hey, I'm going to endorse you. He said, you're going to go up 30 points in the polls. He said, I'm 406-0. He said, you don't be the one. And I said, no, sir, we will not be the one. We're going to win this thing for you in Alabama. And so for us to get that endorsement, and he said it's early. He knew that, but he knew that I was the guy. He doesn't have to call me in the middle of the night because we got a 2-vote majority in Washington, D.C. right now.
Yeah.
And he knew I was with him early on. He saw me defend him in judiciary when they were coming after him. And he said, and I never have to call you in the middle of the night because what will happen when you got a 2-vote majority, you'll have indefinitely 2 or 3 members that will hold out for some sort of pet project in their state. And I don't do that because America is more important than a pet project in this country or in my state or in my district. And so I try to do what's best for the nation. And so he understands that. And so having his endorsement, being the first to endorse him, I never knew 11 years ago that I'd be running for the U.S. Senate and he'd be endorsing me in this race. But it was a great day for our team, and it certainly moved the needle. I think a lot of people were kind of waiting to see. Nobody went. And then J.D. Vance endorsed shortly after. Obviously, Club came in. We had a Turning Point and Jim Jordan and probably 20 House Freedom Caucus, a number of U.S. senators that said, hey, Barry's an honest broker, and we know what we get with him. Now, granted, I'm the most conservative guy in the Alabama delegation, bar none. I just got a perfect score from Heritage this week, but you can be effective and conservative. I literally had bills signed into law by Joe Biden. I don't know if the auto pen signed it, Joe, or if he signed it, but for veterans. And so we've been able to be effective. And if you look at that and knowing that the president has the confidence that you will be in the fight with him to save this country, then that's encouraging for our team. It's certainly encouraging for us.
Do you foresee a runoff in the race?
I think right now, the way that everything is coalescing with the Senate Conservative Fund coming on board, the president, JD, I think that there's an opportunity to win this without a runoff. I don't want to say that indefinitely because you just don't know. It's a matter of getting your people to turn out. But we think that the momentum is definitely on our side, and we seem to be be able to have the resources to get our message out that the president endorsed, that we're the most conservative member, that we're in the House Freedom Caucus, those sort of things. But we've also been very effective. I think there's an opportunity there. It's a matter of who turns out. I think, and it's a matter of just can you get the message out in the next 40, 50 days.
Yeah. I ask all the candidates that come in because until you've run for a race, people just don't know the time that it takes out of your life. And not to mention when you have a big-time day job,
hey, man,
right?
That's tough, yeah.
And then you're doing this too. How are you feeling right now, physically, mentally? Are you worn out? Are you still on an adrenaline high? Do you just get up every day and somebody say, all right, this is where you're going today, and you go do it? I mean, where are you right now?
Yeah, so, I think probably you're voting in D.C. Obviously, you got a 2-vote majority, and we had some guys miss votes. I just don't do that. That's my job. That's what the people hired me to do. But the one thing that has encouraged me as I travel around the state is there are great people in the state. So that kind of keeps me energized. It's not to say that they don't tell me, and I don't look too far ahead on the calendar because it can be depressing sometimes because you're like, sir, you got this, you got this, you got this, you got this, right? Like, I mean, who told me I was going to have to do Joe's show for 2 hours a day? Nobody told me that, Joe. But anyway, so it's kind of like you go and you do, but when you meet the people and you see the people in this state and how wonderful they are and how much many of them appreciate the job you're doing, and they will come out of the woodwork and volunteer for you and help you. And so that kind of keeps the energy. Granted, I'll be happy when May 19th gets here. I think all of us will. But at the end of the day, man, it's an honor to do this, and I have to keep my head checked and say, hey, this is a calling or assignment as I see it. And this was not something I ever imagined I'd be doing, but I'm certainly honored to do it. And so it helps me when the people come up and encourage you and say, hey, we love what you're doing in D.C. We love that you help the president. We love what you stand for, and we want to help you. That's a good thing.
Very good. All right, so let's hit some big topics. We've got a war with Iran. And supposedly we've hit over, depending on the person giving the talk, we've hit somewhere between 9 and 15,000 plus targets, right? I mean, supposedly we have decimated their Air Force, their Navy. They have nothing except maybe drones and things underground in caves that we don't know about. Correct?
Yeah, that would be a pretty good assessment based on the briefings I've gotten. Is we've taken out their air defense, we took out their Air Force, we took out their Navy, and so yeah, there are some things probably like you said in some caves somewhere that I'm not aware of, or we may not be aware of as a nation, and we may know, but we can't get to it. But yeah, I think we've done some good things. I think we've certainly crippled their ability to defend, and now it's a matter of what is it going to take to get them to come to the table and negotiate.
So President Trump comes out Wednesday night, does his presidential address. Some people on the left would say he should have done that before. I can look back objectively and say there's a reason why he didn't do that, because you don't want to tell your enemy what's fixing to happen. And you can't trust a number of people in the House or the Senate on the Democratic side to keep their mouth shut before what we're about to do. So he says 2 to 3 weeks, we think we're done. We're going to leave it to Europe or the Gulf states to secure the Strait of Hormuz. What are your thoughts on that, and where do you think we're headed with this?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question. I think the president is right. I think that we don't, I'm a veteran. My brother's a Marine F-18 guy. My son-in-law's an Army Ranger. So anytime we don't have to put boots on the ground, I grew up with Fort Rucker in my district, so I know what that means to families. And so I think the president, he's doing what he can to make it where they could be easily forced to the table, possibly by the EU or whoever decides to get involved. But I think the president, I don't think he wants to send boots in there. I think he wanted to send a message. And the thing with the Strait of Hormuz is we were kind of we didn't want a ship sunk in that strait because that would delay shipments of oil for 6 months. And so that was a big concern. We couldn't literally have an oil tanker go down in that strait. Now, I think the president's going to be like, Europe, y'all haven't helped us with this, but you guys were more in danger than we are from these nuclear weapons. Obviously, they've had attacks here, and we've got sales in the U.S. We've already had 4 in the last few weeks, I guess, since the thing started. But, we'll see how it plays out. But the one thing, and we've talked about this before, the president usually has a good plan. I think he's usually playing checkers when a lot of people are playing. I'm sorry, he's playing chess when a lot of people are playing checkers. He's got some moves ahead. I think that was part of the reason he took Maduro out in Venezuela was for the energy, because we had already had investments by our oil producers years ago into that country, and the regime had seized that. So by plucking Maduro, we're able to bring those facilities back online. The people in Venezuela can benefit from that oil. I think that we're obviously doing a new refinery here in the U.S., and let's not forget that Biden killed the Keystone pipeline and opened up the Nordic 2 for Nord Stream 2 for Russia. So there was a lot of things that the prior administration did to cripple us on energy, but I think that we're doing the right things. But the biggest thing with Iran, I think, for us was we hit them midnight hammer, and President Trump told them, he said, look, stop enriching uranium. And they thumbed their nose at us. And he said, because if you don't, we're coming back. And Epic Fury was we came back, and we delivered on that promise. Now, what the president does between now and the next couple of weeks, what Europe does, I think that's anybody's guess. But I usually trust the president. I mean, he stopped 9 wars around the planet already. He took out the number one state-sponsored terror in the last few weeks. You can trust him on these things, and he's not into long wars. He's not that kind of guy. He tries to get the mission done and get it accomplished in a way that I think sometimes it startles our enemies. I mean, certainly the Maduro thing was an amazing feat, and how quickly we've acted down in Iran, 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks now. I think that the president sent a pretty strong message that we're not going to tolerate terrorist and state-sponsored terror, especially when we have military bases in that area, but we have Israel as an ally as well. And we're just not going to have those guys with the capability to attack our folks with nuclear weapons.
Do you have any knowledge, or do you know, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, some of the Gulf states, there's reports out there that MBS, who runs Saudi Arabia, was really on board saying, go get them, finish the job. Is that your understanding, or are those reports wrong?
I don't know. I know that the one thing that shocked me was that Iran attacked some of their Arab friends in that our Arab
Kuwait,
neighbors.
Bahrain,
yeah, I mean, that was weird
yeah.
to me. I was like, why would they do that? I mean, they should have focused on our resources in Israel if they had a bone to pick. But it shows to me kind of how crazy they are in a little kind of way, because the Arab nations probably would have been more. I'm sure Trump talked to them, because let's not forget, he put the Abraham Accords together. He's done some great things in that region. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. I think he's done some great things, and so I'm sure he notified them, and they probably gave him a green light on it. But if I know the president, he probably didn't ask for the green light, but he just wanted to let them know we're coming. Are you guys okay with this? But the fact that Iran turned around and went after some of their neighbors like that I think that was a huge strategical mistake on their part.
Yeah. No, I wasn't asking if he got their approval. I'm just thinking, if and nobody knows what's going to happen. Let's just say in 3 weeks we say we're coming home and we leave. There's a chance that Iran could be more powerful than they are if they start saying, we're going to charge $2 million for you to go through the strait for every cargo ship of oil. And that would weaken the other Gulf states. And so that's where I was going with that.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this morning, but Israel and America and a couple of countries are looking at cutting a new canal to bypass the strait.
Right.
And so that might be a way. I mean, yeah, Iran could try to, I guess, assume to charge that for passage. But, that's going to hurt Israel. I mean, that's going to hurt Europe more than it's going to hurt us. We don't get a large percentage of our energy from those guys. But I think, too, the president said, y'all can either fix it or buy from us. You got one or two choices, right? And so I think it'll certainly help us on exports. But they could go up on price, but it wouldn't take long before the economics would drive them to do a canal and bypass the strait and let Iran pound sand.
What are the thoughts of people in Congress and the no? We came out of the State of the Union address. We were really happy. We had just gotten rid of Maduro. Things were really looking good. Nobody knew what was fixing to happen in Iran the way it did. We're headed to the summer. Everybody's going on vacation, driving season. Oil. When I bought gas back at the end of February, I paid $2.19. Today, I paid $3.75.
Mm-hmm.
So the people at Chevron, Shell Oil, ConocoPhillips, all the big CEO of the oil companies are telling us that the prices are still not baked in on what's happened, taking all the oil off the market. Is there a big concern about the midterms and the prices of the gas affecting? Because people vote with their pocketbooks.
Sure, sure. You know, I think that, I think the American people, and this is speaking kind of based on people I talk to, and not everybody agrees, but I think they don't mind paying a little bit higher price right now if we can get Iran as the state-sponsored terror, the number one in the world, off the, if we can get them out of the mix and our kids and grandkids will be safe. Now, how long does this hang out? I don't know. I think as we're trying, like I said, we're trying to increase supply, and so we can continue the demand's going to remain high in the summer. So, but I think it's important to mention to the audience that let's not forget that Joe Biden raided the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, just before the midterms to lower prices.
He did.
And it's like Fetterman said a few weeks ago. He said in 2022, prices were about what they are right now, and the media wasn't even talking about it. And we're literally trying to do away with one of the most awful regimes in the world who they call us the Great Satan. And I don't think people mind, and I know I don't mind paying a little more right now if it ensures that my kids and grandkids can live on a safer planet. And so, we want it down and done in November. I would love to see gas down to $1.90 a gallon, or whatever that looks like. Can we get there? I don't know. I mean, we'll see how it plays out. But I think that if we pay a small price now to offset a huge cost in the future for our country, then I think it's a price worth paying.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not against this at all. I'm just of the opinion of Colin Powell. You break it, you own it, and you don't know what you own once you break it.
Right.
What are the thoughts nationally, because you're in D.C., on the Republicans keeping the House and the Senate? And that's going to lead to my next question that's really important.
Yeah, so early polling in January, and this is, again, lots changed. I mean, we had the success with Maduro. We've had some good things happen. Of course, we had this Iran issue pop up. But if you looked at it early in the year, we were literally we were the highest, and this is Quinnipiac. Now, this wasn't a poll that's Republican favorable. They're normally not our friends. But we were polling higher with our base than the Democrats were at any time in the history that ever ran the poll. And so I think the fact – and here's one thing, too. As April 15th approaches, the tax breaks for small businesses and families is going to impact them, and that should have a huge, huge impact on how people vote. My daughter literally texted me a few days ago and said, "Hey, Dad, thanks for the tax break," and she's a young married couple, and so because of the big, beautiful bill. And so I think as that plays out, people will see more of their money. Let's go into the federal government. Obviously, I think if we can move the 12 approach, we're fighting over DHS right now, but if we do some things we haven't done in 3 decades to do away with these CRs and omnibuses and kicking the can down the road, I think the American people, if we message on that, I think that's a good thing. Again, we'll have to see where fuel is, and I know people vote their pocketbook. You mentioned that, and there are people concerned about high prices on diesel right now because that will impact the markets, and transportation is part of everything we buy and sell in most cases. So we'll see. But we were in a good spot in January. We'll see how we land the plane coming out of Iran as a figure of speech. But however we address that, and if President Trump can get out of there clean and feel like we've removed the regime, then I think we're in a good spot in November. But we only have a 2-vote majority, and there's been some states redrawing some districts. But I think we pick up a few and we lose a few. So we'll see how it shakes out. But it's going to be a battle. In the midterms, you normally lose it. President Trump has done a lot of first in his lifetime. And so I'd love to see us hold it and maybe gain a few.
Yeah. In the unlikely event that the Republicans hold the House, there's a saying in D.C., you either legislate or you investigate. If the Democrats get the House in 26, what do you think's fixing to happen?
Oh, the impeachment will happen day one. I mean, I serve on the Judiciary Committee with Jamie Raskin, and he's a ranking member. He already had articles of impeachment drafted before the last cycle, and so if we'd have lost the House, they were going to impeach President Trump day one. And it's just going to be the same crap, excuse my language, but the same crap they did in 2016, they would love to do now if they had the majority. They're literally, they suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. I've never seen it. The man could cure cancer and they'd be mad about it. It beats all I've ever seen. So they're going to continue to fight his agenda because he's a threat to the system. And we haven't seen that in our lifetime where a guy actually came in with a movement for America first and putting the citizens first and securing the border and moving the embassy to Jerusalem. All these things that he said he was going to do, he has done. And I had a friend of mine that served with the president and worked with him. He said, Barry, if you could ever show the president where he made a promise on media, that would be on the chalkboard to get done. And so he's the kind of guy, he tells you he's going to do something and he does it. And so, yeah, I mean, they're going to cause a problem if they can, but we're just going to stay in a fight and get it done, I hope.
All right, we're talking with United States Congressman Barry Moore. We'll be back after the break, news and weather, final segment. We'll be back. Bye.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. Joe is a 20-year veteran of the Alabama courts specializing in criminal defense and family law. If you need a private legal consultation, email Joe at joeingramlaw.com. And now, welcome back to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram.
All right, we're back for the final segment of the week of The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, your Alabama lawyer. We have been so fortunate and we are so blessed, and we've had United States Congressman Barry Moore with us all morning with us, and we're back for the final segment. What were we just talking about before the break? I forgot. What were we talking about, John?
Come on, John. I don't even remember, guys.
What were
we're talking about, maybe affordability and coming out of that. Was that the last thing?
I don't know.
I think about
working with a bunch of professionals here.
I think you were talking about if they didn't keep the House, what the Democrats
working
going
a
to
bunch of
do.
professionals. Thank you, John.
All right.
So paying attention.
Yeah.
So this is a really big question. You've gotten to be a part of history of 2 impeachments against the sitting president. And if you become the United States Senator and they impeach him, you'll get to sit in history again for the 3rd impeachment.
I am so tired of making history.
3rd impeachment trial of President Donald J. Trump. Have you thought about that yet before I said it to you, or are you just like, wow, Joe, I hadn't even thought about that yet?
No, I really hadn't thought about it. I've been a part of some historical times and the time that I've served. I mean, the first Republican majority in the state legislature, served 2 terms there. Was able to go in and, like I said, be the first in the nation to endorse Trump. And certainly the speaker fight we had when I first got there, January 6th was my 3rd day on the job. There's been a lot of firsts for me, and so I hadn't really thought about that. But, obviously there's some things in history you just wish wouldn't happen, but we certainly want to be in the fight. And if we're there, we're going to defend the president every step of the way.
I got to interview Doug Jones. He's a friend of mine. He was in the Senate for one of the Senate impeachment trials. If that were to happen, and I hope that it doesn't, okay? But if it does, Congressman Moore, please keep your notes from the impeachment trial because I may buy them from you someday.
I will do that. I haven't thought about that.
But you'll get to be a juror to somebody. There has never been a president impeached 3 times in our history.
Right.
So that's something to think about. I want to ask you about something. In today's society, all the social media we have, everything that we have, there are people that are running for Congress, running for judges differently than they've ever done before. And this is where I want to go with this. Do you think it's harder being in Congress now because every time somebody runs out of a meeting, They jump on their phone, they jump on Instagram, they jump on Facebook, they say what they just did, what their agenda is. Do you think it's harder for all of you guys to get in a room, ladies included, and talk about the big issues for the country that need to be solved? Because everybody wants to go out and have a talking point on social media. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would imagine, I haven't served when phones didn't exist, but I can say this, like I said, at the state legislative level, when I was there, we didn't have the phones quite as occupied. I didn't have the smartphones as much, or more flip phones back then. It really will consume so much of your time. And, I don't look at social media a lot. Oddly enough, I do have a Facebook, but it's for my friends. It ain't for people who want to talk bad about me or good about me. It's for people that I'm friends with or went to school with. And so, look, I've got a lot of friends on there, but when we go like the House Freedom Caucus meetings, and that's the only place I go up there, I don't feel like I need a shower when I leave. But it's like we sit in a room, we put our phones down, and we talk about how do we make this legislation more conservative? How do we really do what we were told the people we were going to do when we were running? So there are those meetings where we do that, but they can go long, and they can be tedious, and they can be tense. But we leave there united. But, yeah, as far as before and coming out of judiciary, you always see – and it's weird, like, they'll be shooting a video, walking down the steps or whatever. Yeah. And look, my team says you should do more of that, because when you go live or whatever, a video does get more clicks and people watch it. It's not something I spend a lot of time doing, but I do see members that do it.
Yeah. I've seen more of that this time. I watch Nancy Mace a lot. Mm-hmm. She's trying to go back and be governor of South Carolina. Why, I don't know, but she is. And so I think these things are making it harder for our country to come together and get in a room and solve the big issues. Because Steve Marshall was here last week, and this shows my age. When Tip O'Neill was Speaker of the House and Reagan was president, as bad as they hated each other, I mean, they were on opposite polar sides of the issues.
Right.
Tip O'Neill could come to the White House. They could have dinner. They could sit down and talk about big issues for the country. And I think we've lost that because of social media over the last 10 or 15 years. I'm really concerned about that, seriously.
Yeah, and I think to your point, if you want to get clicks, you have to be pretty fiery. You have to be pretty divisive if you're going to do a social media post. Sometimes you can talk about a vote or a bill, and maybe people tune in, but I think the more you can kind of be a lightning rod, I think in many ways, the more clicks you get. And that is dangerous, because then you're liable to say some things or do some things that are going to alienate some people you could have worked with otherwise. And so, I think that back when Tip O'Neill and Reagan were friends, I mean, like I said, I know one was a Democrat, one was a Republican, but they seem to be able to get in a room and get things done. And we don't see that as much in D.C. now. It's trying to get your whole team together so you can get something done, because the chances of getting somebody on the other side of the aisle to work with you doesn't happen very often. And like I said, I got a veterans bill that I think I got 35. I got quite a few votes on that with the Dems, but it was something for veterans. The same with ag. Sometimes you can get some consensus, but if it comes to really policy on board or stuff like that, it's tough to get somebody on the other side of the aisle to help you.
Is there anybody in particular on the other side of the aisle that you say, I know they have a constituency. I know they have to look at the issues the way they do from a blue state, but you enjoy working with them because you think that they're very intellectual on the issues? Is there anybody that inspires you on that side?
There are a couple guys. Henry Cuellar from Texas is pretty good. Tom Swazi from New York, and Tom is he was in my bipartisan prayer breakfast. I think I've been able to have a good impact on his life from a spiritual standpoint, but we do have a good relationship. Now, granted, I don't see him, he don't vote with us a lot of times. He might on some veterans issues. But there are those folks that I'm able to work with and to talk with. But there are not a lot, not like where there was in the state level when I was in Alabama. It's a different animal. It's just so divided. It's unfortunate. And like I said, I think Trump derangement syndrome is so real that some of those guys, man, they just – if it's something Trump's behind, they're against it. Doesn't matter how much sense it makes.
All right. Congressman, we got about 14 minutes left. So I want to hit you with a couple of quick questions. Last 24 hours, Pam Bondi fired. Mm-hmm. do you think it's more the Epstein files, or do you think it's because Trump's mad because she's not going after Comey, Letitia James, Brennan, the crowds fast enough?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination probably. I don't know for sure how much of it's Epstein or how much of it's the weaponization of the DOJ against President Trump. We talked about how they came after him and many members of Congress. And they tried to put everybody around Trump in prison, and certainly Fannie Willis and what they did in Georgia, what Alvin Bragg did in New York, Letitia James, the way they went after those guys with the CIA, the DOJ, the FBI, all those agencies, we have to hold them accountable. And it's like we talk about justice being blind, but it was so weaponized. The agencies, whether it was the IRS, the EPA came after conservative donors, the DOJ came after the leader of the party, they came after members of the party. And so President Trump, I think if we don't send the right message, Joe, I think when they take power back, we are in big, big trouble. And so I think the people who violated the law using the most powerful law enforcement agencies within the federal government to go after political opponents, they need to be held accountable. So I think the president feels that way. And certainly on the Epstein thing, I mean, I'm ready. I had said this when Ray was in the hearings. I wanted everybody on the list. When the Dems were in charge and I was in judiciary, I'm like, I want everybody's name that's on the list. I want it out. We want to know. And so I think there are a lot of people that want to see that. And so I don't know what Pam was doing. I'm not sure. Look, murder rates are the lowest they've been in the country. I mean, she's had her plate pretty full. But at the same time, I think the president would like to see some movement. Somebody needs to be perp walked. And somebody needs to be held accountable because they did everything they could to destroy us.
In the last week, we had oral arguments with the Supreme Court for birthright citizenship. What are your thoughts on that issue?
I'm sure hoping the court goes with the president on this because birthright issues were originally set up for slaves who were born in this country, and we gave them citizenship. But there aren't any. There may be 2 or 3 nations around the world that allow birthright citizenship. And so what happens is you have these people. I saw it on the southern border. These ladies would literally be south of the southern border ready to go into labor, and they would come across the border as they were going into labor. We'd take them to a hospital there in Arizona, Texas, wherever, California, whatever border state. This was in Arizona where I was at. And the doggone hospital administrators were having to get car seats because by federal law, they couldn't leave the hospital without a car seat, but it was the federal government that opened the border that flooded our hospitals. And so we had U.S. citizens waiting, ladies out in the hall trying to deliver their children, and illegals were taking up the – so there are a lot of things I think that we have to look at, but birthright citizenship is a problem for the future of the country. I saw this morning in a report where one Chinese billionaire has 100 children born through surrogates in this country. They take them back to China after they're born. They raise them as communists and send them back to vote. And so over time, over the next decade, we could literally lose our way in a legal manner if we don't fix this in the courts.
Yeah. We're talking with Congressman Barry Moore. He's been so kind to give us his time this morning for the entire show. The filibuster rule. This is important to me as a lawyer because I've studied political science. I have a master's degree in history. I've read the Federalist Papers. I love this country, okay? And I believe there's a reason why we have the filibuster rule. I really do. But we talked about this off the air. What are your thoughts? And do you think it's time to just kill it?
Yeah, I do. And I know you and I may not agree on this, but I think that if we don't, there's the Save America Act will never become law. I think that the border security, all that stuff that we need to do to make sure that the executive orders that the President of the United States is trying to put in place, they won't become law. We won't fund DHS and ICE. They'll open the borders back up again. We'll have people voting in these elections. We as a nation, I think it's time. And, we have to adjust sometime, and I get it. I mean, birthright citizenship wasn't a problem when we freed the slaves. It's a problem now. There are things that we have to address in a different manner. And so I think that it's important that if we really want to save this nation on its 250th birthday, I think we have to look at the way we play ball and the way I know you don't want to do that, but my thoughts are the Dems will do it day one because Manchin and Sinema were the two. They were holding the line against Schumer to do it. They're both gone. So if we don't do America first now, we may not have a chance in the future.
I fully believe if the Democrats get back in power, they'll do it and they won't think a thing about it.
Yeah, I mean, we've never arrested a president before. They did it. We've never impeached one 3 times. They will do it. We've never actually raided a man's home that was president of the United States. We've never indicted one. We've never certainly charged him with felonies. They've done every bit of that every step of the way. To think that they won't nuke the filibuster, I think is naive.
Yeah. And, I've listened to some people on the Democratic side of the aisle that talk on podcasts. If they get back in power, they've made some serious threats about things they're going to do to people. I think they fully intend to pack the Supreme Court with as many as they need so that they don't ever have to worry about a case coming up before the Supreme Court again that's going to hurt them with numbers.
Yeah, and they'll make D.C. a state to give them 2 more senators. They will do whatever they need to do to totally take control of the federal government in the United States as we know it, and they will nuke the filibuster. And I've heard it said, if they tell you who they are, you better believe them. These guys, they're telling you they're coming for us. We need to fix it now. And some of these folks, like I said, they need to be held accountable. We need to see some perp walks. We need to see some of these people that weaponize the DOJ. So there is a deterrent the next time. And this Save America, we really need to pass that. But I don't think we get there without going through the filibuster. Now, Thune says he doesn't have the votes. I don't know. But I'd get it on the floor, and we'd see wherever a U.S. senator stood. That'd be my position.
Yeah. In the last week, we had so much happen in D.C. There was a preservation group that sued President Trump over the ballroom, and this was the second time around, and the federal judge put a stay in place so that he could file an appeal. And they're doing this just to be punitive because at the end of the day, the judge says that Congress has to approve the money for any kind of additions to the White House. And that's not necessarily correct. That's not the law. And 2, this isn't even being funded with federal dollars. This is all privatized money for the ballroom on the White House.
I mean, he's doing a great service for the future presidents of this country and for the country itself. And look, if you've been to the White House, you know there's not a room in there that you can get everybody in. When we did the 4th of July, the signing of the big, beautiful bill, we had the senators, the House members, and our spouses. Man, you could not breathe in there. It was so crowded. Literally, the president had to stand on the stairwell so we could see him. And he's just trying to build a ballroom so we can have those events for the future of the nation, no matter who the president is, and it's not costing the taxpayers one dime. And yet, like I said, if he was curing cancer, they'd be mad about it. And this is just another thing, just a way that they can throw some sort of tantrum over something that's actually good for the country, but they're trying to paint it in a bad light.
All right, so we got about 8 minutes left, Congressman. What do you want to tell me or the state of Alabama for people that are going to be going to the polls for you on May the 19th?
Well, I'd love to ask them for their vote. And you know, there's a lot of good people in this race. You and I've talked about some of the candidates. But I think it's important to mention that everybody running a Republican primary in Alabama says they're a Trump conservative. I mean, I saw my brochure. If I hand you my brochure, it says Trump conservative. But I think the reality is I am truly the Trump conservative. If you look at the fact that I was with him, the first elected official in the nation endorsed him 11 years ago, and that he's endorsed me, and he said, hey, this is the guy that I know that I can trust. We've been in the fight for over a decade now. Please send him to help me. I think that I am the Trump guy in this race. There's no doubt about that. In addition to that, it says conservative. And so Heritage gave me 100 this week. I have the highest scores. If you look at Liberty scores across, I mean, I'm running to fill Tommy Tuberville's spot. He's got a 95 Liberty score. I've got a 96. We're the top 2 in the delegation. And so I razz him because we went to D.C. in 2020 together. We've been there 5 years. And so I'm still a little more conservative than he is, but I'm also endorsed by the president. And I think, too, it's important to know that I'm the only one in the race that's actually got legislative experience. I've taken ideas through committee and onto the floor and into law, and they've been signed both at the state level and the federal level. And that means that day one, when 26 happens, November, we got 24 months left with Donald Trump as president, as 47th president of the United States. We need to send some people that already have staff in place that can go to work day one, that have the relationships. And when I call the president, I might not take his calls, but he always takes mine, you know, because so it's like that's important for the state of Alabama, because when we need something for the state, when I call him, he will take my calls. And those relationships are huge. He loves Alabama. Alabama loves him. And he and I have a good friendship. And so he said when he endorsed me, he said, Barry's a fighter, he's a friend, and he'll never let you down. And I think that that's important. I mean, the people need to know where the president is on this. But not only that, my record, it's conservative. And if you look at the time I've been in the House, I've been in 5 years, our congressional office was number one in the nation in workplace environment out of all Republican offices. They only gave 8 awards, Joe. We got second in an award for accessibility. We literally have solved 8,000 cases in 5 years for veterans and small business owners. We have done the work at the level within the state, but also in D.C. And so I think it's just important that people know that, hey, everybody's going to run as a Trump conservative, but I have a record, I think, that is stellar in both being conservative and a friend of the president, and that matters to the people of Alabama.
So I'm just sitting here thinking curiously. You can call the president of the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to call him right now on your show, but I can.
No, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. I'm just kidding.
Yes, I called him, and honestly, it's interesting thing, Joe, is when you get him on the phone, you can't hardly get off. I mean, I called him one morning. We were talking, and I'm like, sir, I was thinking to myself, I need to go. I'm busy. I don't know about you, but I mean, he's the busiest man on the planet. And but yeah, I've been to Mar-a-Lago with him a number of times, and we developed a relationship. And for him to endorse me this early in the race tells you what he thinks.
Yeah. What do you think when he leaves office? How do you think history will treat President Trump?
I think that probably it might take a little time, but he'll be one of the greatest presidents in the nation's history. And I truly mean that, because the work he has done, the way that he has tried to fix the problems that were created over years of neglect and power seeking by people, he didn't need a job, and he could ride off in the sunset and let this thing burn. And he's been willing to stay in the fight as the tip of the spear. And nobody's been more persecuted and prosecuted than him. Nobody's been more attacked by the media. He used to be the darling of Hollywood until he became the president. And they all turned on him like the media did, like many in the Democratic Party who used to take his money. And so I think he'll be remembered as one of the greatest presidents. And I'm a big Reagan fan. I quote him all the time. But Donald Trump is going to go down because of the resistance and the fights that he had to go through and the torture that he has been exposed to, and the way he's been done by different agencies and different people. I think that he'll go down as one of the greatest in our lifetime, maybe in the nation's history.
Yeah, he's certainly done some things that nobody else would have the guts to do, particularly Iran. And when he became president the first time, he immediately went after ISIS, and he got rid of that.
Yeah. And the border, for years, Republicans and Democrats were always like, oh, we got to secure the border. We got to secure the border. Nobody really did that. He actually tried to build a wall, and we funded that in a big, beautiful bill. Nobody's ever moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Everybody talked about that, but nobody ever did it. Nobody ever attacked Iran because Iran didn't need a nuclear weapon. Rachel Maddow a year ago was on TV saying Trump's going to wait around till Iran gets a nuclear weapon. And now she's mad about him going in Iran and doing the very thing that she was criticizing him about 12 months ago. And so, yeah, I think he has the courage, and I love the fact that he really does care about the country, and he's courageous, man, in so many ways, that he just tells you like it is, and it ain't always politically correct, but the man means what he says, and he does what he says he's going to do.
Yeah. Sitting here trying to think of something really good I want to ask you, because there's so many questions.
BarryMoreForAlabama.com, Joe.
That's what you need to know. Gosh, let me ask you. I hadn't got to ask you anything personal. What do you like to do if you have any spare time right now?
So I love to fish. I'm not a Jim Jordan.
You're a fisher?
Yeah, Jim Jordan loves to golf, and anytime he comes down, but I'm like, Jim, come down, but we'll set up a golf game for you and some guys. But I love to fish. I've always enjoyed it. It's the thing I do. I get offshore and my phone don't ring after about 7 or 8 miles, and I can focus on just being out. And so for me, being out on the water is where I kind of find I'll tell you a good story. So there's a song it's called Boats by Kenny Chesney, and it's like my favorite song ever. And so my kids, Alex even knows the first line because I sing it sometime. But I was sitting next to Tim Burchett on the floor of the house, and I said, Tim, do you know Kenny Chesney? He said, yeah, I know Chess. I said, text him this line right here. Say, Boats, old Joe's got a Boston whaler. And so Kenny texted right back and said, every word of that song is true. But it is because, I just love being on the water. I grew up on it, and it's one of those things I enjoy the most.
Well, we wish you well. We are about to wrap up the Legal Lowdown for this week. We've had Congressman Barry Moore in the House for 2 hours. Congressman, thank you for your service to our country, sir.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming on our show. My audience appreciates it. And I personally appreciate the time that you gave me. It was more than I asked for. And I have thoroughly enjoyed it, sir.
Yes, sir, Joe. Thank you. God bless you. And it was an honor to be here.
Well, I don't know if it was an honor, but it was something. It's what we do here. You've been listening to the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. We are on WERC 105.5. We're on WBHP in Huntsville and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. We're going to take a week or so off. We've been going nonstop since December. I work 100 hours a week. I haven't had a break, and I'm losing my mind, and I can't remember anything. So my wife said, Joe, we're going to take about a week off. So we're going to be off for a week or so. I always have a final thought for the week, and it's usually dedicated to my marathon runners. This is something I'm experiencing right now. The run that you are missing, that you are running away from, is the run that you need, because you're either depressed, you're stressed out, and you need to get some adrenaline. You need to get rid of some cortisol in your body, and you need to go do the run. And remember what I've always told you. The moment you want to stop, you got 80% more in the tank every single time. I don't care if you're at mile 18. You get to mile 26. Congressman Barry Moore is with us. Y'all have a great week. We'll be back. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram of Joe Ingram Law. Don't forget to follow Joe's Legal Lowdown podcast on iHeart. If you need a private legal consultation, reach out to Joe on his website, joeingramlaw.com. Tune in again next Saturday for the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be performed is greater than the quality of legal services performed by any other lawyer.